Today's guest, Kelly Sayre, teaches defensive mindset to moms and dads nationwide. Defensive mindset is different from and more important than any given self-defense technique. It's about the awareness, intelligence, and permission you need to access to do the right thing in an emergency. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, and do come find us on Facebook or sign up at Patreon for early access and member-only goodies. Thanks for watching. Now let's get to work. I'd like to introduce you all to two close personal friends of the show. John and John are a pair of law enforcement officers with 3 decades of combined experience in helping people stay safe and what happens when that fails. They've built a shop, Shield Protection Products, that offers a full range of self-defense items like pepper spray and stun guns that real people can use in the real world. They're like-minded folks, so they also offer important safety equipment like fire extinguishers, medical kits, and car escape tools. They provide an instructional video with every purchase so you know how to use anything you buy. Find them at shieldprotectionproducts.com and use the discount code SFOTB10 to get 10% off of your purchase. That's SFOTB10 at shieldprotectionproducts.com. Seriously, friends, if you're looking for the best equipment to keep your family safe, along with advice from knowledgeable professionals on how to use it, while supporting this show and a small business that deserves it, you'll find it at Shield Protection Products. Go check them out and tell them Safest Family on the Block sent you. Good morning and welcome back, everybody, to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining us today is Kelly Sayre. Kelly, hello.
Hello.
It's a real treat to have you on board. Kelly is the founder and president of the Diamond Arrow Group, a situational awareness and risk management consulting firm. She is driven to empower people to maximize their opportunities and succeed. As a speaker, she brings energy and humor to the stage, along with realistic advice on how to tackle emergency action planning for private businesses. She creates meaningful connections, ignites communal engagement, and drives collaboration in an effort to improve the well-being of her clients. She's compassionate and strategic at once, and works to create the bridges needed within teams and groups to create workplaces where employees feel confident and safe. And you're here today to talk about how we can apply some of those things to our own working group, which is our family.
Yes.
And we chatted a bit before he came on the show, and specifically about how parents can take that same responsibility.
Yes. And it's such an important topic because really it all starts at home. It all starts when we're young. And so the more that we can communicate and help parents, help guardians, help those who have young children in their care, realize that some of those conversations that need to start shouldn't involve specifically stranger danger, but that behavior of strangers that we've all talked about, watching the body language, watching for anomalies, things that don't seem right, kind of like Sesame Street. One of these things doesn't belong. But one thing I've found over and over again as I talk to parents, especially, is they say, this is great information. Can you talk to my kids? And I say, yes, definitely. And it's important for you. And more often than not, they brush it off and say, oh, I don't need that. I'm too old. I'm this, I'm that. Nobody would want, to attack me, or I'm not that target. And everyone is someone's target. Everyone is some predator's, what they're looking for, either by their outside, exterior looks, or by they're distracted, or maybe they driving a fancy car so that criminal is going to think that, okay, if I rob them, there is a financial benefit to me. So those are all things to be aware of. And we hear in so many different aspects of our life, you can't really love someone else until you love yourself. You can't really know someone until you know yourself. Well, I'm going to add to that, then you can't really protect someone else if you don't know how to protect yourself. So learning these skills, yes, it's important to educate your children, but you need to have those basic foundational skills in place and have honed your intuition in order to help others. And so I always go back to, yes, it's important, to start at an early age, having those conversations, building their intuition, building their observation skills. But it's also a great time for you to maybe dust those skills off for yourself. So often,
What's that saying about how we spend so much of our energy working to give our kids the things that we didn't have, but how much more valuable is it to teach our kids the skills we didn't have?
correct. Isn't that a Bruce Lee quote?
It could be, and Bruce Lee,
I think so.
yeah, Bruce's most famous quote is, "I never said half the crap you said I said."
Yes. Just because it's a meme on the internet doesn't make it true. Yeah. So and the thing is these skills that we talk about in regards to personal safety are all skills that every person has. Maybe they haven't looked at them from their personal safety perspective. That's one thing that I'm big on when I'm speaking to women or doing a presentation, is reminding them, you already have these foundational skills. So this is not something that you need to feel overwhelmed by. This is not something like learning a new language, because it can kind of feel that way if you get down that rabbit hole of some of the more tactical terms or some of the more higher level, I would say. So a lot of what I love to do is taking something that is very tactical or very, high level industry, self-defense industry specific threat management type situation, and saying, okay, this is an example of doing that in real life. For parents, or again, I use parents in general, but I'm also including anyone who takes care of young children or who's around young children, is if you think about it, before they could really had a grasp on the language that they speak, they would mumble, they would gurgle, they would point, they would use body language. The sound of their cry communicated what they were looking for or what they needed. And if you've been around small children that aren't yours with their guardian or their parent, it's almost comical to listen to the parent go, the kid making a bunch of random noises and gurgles and grunts and cries, and you have no idea what that kid needs. But the parent is like, yes, I know, okay, and they know exactly what they need. They know exactly why they're crying, what the cry means. Are they upset? Are they having a tantrum? Or are they in pain? Are they hungry? Do they have a dirty diaper? The parent always knows. And so I remind you already have the skills to read body language, to understand what another human being is trying to communicate. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, for those that maybe aren't around young children, if you are taking care of an elderly family member who, let's say, had a stroke, and so they have trouble with their speech, they have a little bit of an impediment now, you are still able to understand because you know them. And so those basic human comprehension skills of reading body language and understanding what someone's trying to communicate can be used on others, on strangers. Yes, it's easier when we know that person, but still there's little things that we can tell, the way that their face looks, are they smiling? Are they sad? Are they angry? We can read those emotions. And even if we don't understand the language or understand exactly what they're trying to communicate, we can get an overall vibe and know, okay, something's up. I either need to pay more attention to this, or this is a warning and I need to get to safety. And so I always remind people, you have that intuition. It's a natural gift that you get. And what we need to do is reinforce your trust and intuition, and realize you're not always going to understand why your intuition is sending you a message, but know that it's in response to something and it has your best interest in mind. So, to use the technical term of heuristics, it's really fast. And our observation, all our different senses are taking in observations at all times. And so when all of a sudden our intuition sounds an alarm bell, whatever that is for each individual, And the more you get to listen and practice listening to your intuition, you'll understand what those signals mean. Later, you can say, okay, something's up. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to leave the situation, or I'm not going to get out of my car right now. I'm just going to sit a bit and wait and watch, whatever it may be. And later, when you're in a safe place and you have time to kind of go back and mentally review, then little things might start popping up. Little things might, oh, I heard that noise. Oh, I saw that when I was driving in, but disregarded it because I didn't have the other clues yet, or I
That makes good sense.
and you
something really valuable
oh,
there.
That's why my intuition went off. But the basic thing is trust your intuition.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we're done a disservice. For example, there's that scene in the Bourne Identity, the newer one, where Matt Damon's sitting down there and does this very technical, very tactical sounding breakdown of all the things in the room, and we feel like that's who we should be to be engaged in safety, where that inarticulable, something's sketchy, your spider sense is tingling. That's perfectly great. We don't have to be that guy or that girl,
right,
to listen to our intuition and be aware of this thing. I mean, we would not be here as a species if we weren't stupendous badasses. Just evolution is unforgiving. And so we have all these pieces and parts and instincts and tools, like you're saying. And then to be reminded that, hey, no, we do have that. And then also, I think even bigger, we are born with these intuitive tools, and then spend most of middle school and high school being told by society to ignore them basically all the time. And to overcome that programming and return to honoring our instincts, I think is a hugely valuable
And I think skill. You bring up a good point in that time period of when we see most of the decline in the belief of individual intuition is because it's questioned. And that's, the big difference is we have that ability to disregard and to judge or question our intuition, which is a natural curiosity. Well, why? Why did I think that? And for parents, sometimes I think back to that age group when I've worked with them, is their world is 15, 16, 17, 18 years. It's not 30, 40, 50 years. So their perspective is a lot smaller. So something that looks like a molehill to us is a mountain to them. And so not disregarding that it was impactful to them, but helping them be curious. Well, why was that so impactful to you? Or why are you having that emotion, do you think? And not judging, not making them feel shamed, not making them feel like they're overreacting, which in the grand scheme of things, because we've got years of wisdom, we get that, okay, that's not going to be the end of the world. Or if that's the worst thing that ever happens to you, you're going to be fine. That's disregarding and downplaying their emotions, which doesn't help them in the long run. And so it's having that patience and remembering, okay, this is a big deal to them, and I need to be curious and inquire about that. One thing that I talk, when you see your, let's say somebody in that age group, so that middle school to high school, really stressed out, or if you're trying to have that conversation about safety, is instead of saying, well, what are you doing to be safe? Or make sure you do this to be safe, that telling is staying curious really helps, but asking them, well, what do you do to relax? Because right now, especially the last year, we've all had to figure out different coping mechanisms for dealing with a heck of a lot of stress. And our students who have been distance learning or have had their worlds blow up and be completely different with so much uncertainty that they can't even go to the adults because the adults don't know. So they're under a lot of stress. So what are you doing to take care of yourself? When I was growing up, I was outside. I loved being outside. I journaled a lot. And so getting curious and saying, well, what are you doing that relieves stress? And then helping them protect those emotional and mental boundaries. Because again, that's going to play out later in life is, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Because as we mentioned at the beginning, you've got to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. And that's a huge thing, especially for women, because of our caretaker and nurturer roles that we are traditionally raised in, or kind of come more naturally, instinctually to us. So how do you protect that? And then realizing that as they go forward, that struggle against peer pressure is so important. And starting with something simple is protecting your downtime, protecting your self-care time, whatever that is just as important as learning physical boundaries, because that will parlay into physical boundaries. You know, hey, do you want to go out to this party? No, I'm really tired. Oh, come on, it'll be so much fun. And yeah, that's fine if you want to, but if you don't, it's okay. Kind of conquering the FOMO. I don't want to miss out. Well, but if you could end up in a bad situation. So really, or if you do go out and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, and I'm just getting a weird vibe from this party. It's not my thing. I'm going to go. Having that strength and enforcing your emotional, mental boundaries could prevent having to enforce a physical boundary. And so it's those simple things that I always try and go, well, what's the root? What is the root of the problem that we're trying to solve? And this goes for both boys and girls. We talk so often, and we shouldn't always tell girls what not to do to stay safe or what to do to stay safe. We also need to help teach our boys those same boundaries. And I'm a big one in modeling the behavior you want to see. And I have 2 boys. You mentioned that you have 2 boys. Mine are pretty young, 9 and almost 8. And I use the example of my youngest had his favorite pizza for dinner one time. And, you know, I had my nice, healthy adult choice, you know, slower metabolism meal. And I was like, oh, your pizza looks so good, buddy. I'm like, can I have a piece? And he looked at me with the most sincere, loving son face and said, Mommy, I hate to say this to you, but I really love this pizza, so no. And I, you know, in that moment, I had that, I'm your mother. I paid for that pizza, you know? And then I was like, wait a minute. He very respectfully set a boundary. Do I really need to eat that piece of pizza? No. So I'm going to model and show him, I respect your boundary. And it was funny because my husband then, of course, was like, oh, he'll give me a piece. Asked him, and my youngest stated the same boundary. And it was this big aha moment for me of like, I just showed him that even adults can respect your boundaries, because that's what's important. If you can communicate your boundary, then it should be respected, unless it's going to cause harm or something like that. But those type of modeling, and I can do that with my boys so that they understand what respecting someone's boundary means, whether it comes from an adult, a male, a female, or someone who's in an authority position.
I think that's hugely important. Kids spend so much of their time with us just running roughshod over their boundaries, telling them they're being silly, telling them it doesn't, well, that's great, kid, but we got a schedule to keep. Or, hey, I paid for that pizza. Yes, you're giving me a slice of your pizza. I think a lot of us do that a lot of the time, and then they expect them to respect their own boundaries when the people who show them how to live have no respect for their boundaries. That's a really, I hadn't thought of it just that way, but that's a very valuable point.
And again, it's one of those things that the more, and why I love when you invited me on your show, is because the more we're talking about it and sharing our own personal journeys of learning, that's where people have that aha moment and go, oh yeah, well, I can do that. That doesn't take a special skill. That's the next time we're sitting down to dinner and I want to have a French fry off my kid's Happy Meal, and he says no, or she says no, I need to respect that, because I need to model the behavior that I want them to continue to grow and be able to enforce as they get older, when it's not just about a piece of pizza, when it's something much more important.
So listen, if you've gotten this far into the show, you like what I'm doing here. So do I, but I need your help to make it all it can be. For just $10 a day, you can help this happen by supporting the show on Patreon. In return, you'll get my undying thanks, early access to episodes, a monthly safety worksheet, and other cool goodies. We're at patreon.com/safestfamily and waiting for your help. Please consider it. It's $3 a month to you, but a big deal to me. And just teaching our kids to respect their intuition and to respect their own boundaries. I think that's very valuable.
Yes.
And
it's never too early to start.
yeah.
It's really, you can have this conversation at whatever age. You know your kids. I come from that place of don't overthink it. And if you screw up, it's okay. Be curious.
You'll get another chance.
Right. And, I always, when they were smaller and it's like, I screwed up, lost my cool, yelled, whatever, and I still do it. At least now I can say, well, maybe they won't remember it when they're old, but I can try and be better or own my mistakes. Cause again, I want to model that behavior of like, hey, I made a mistake. I crossed a boundary, or I did something that I said I wasn't going to do. I'm sorry. And I'm going to try better in the future. And please communicate. My kids are unfortunately, really good about saying, Mom, you're really loud and it's scaring me, because I have a very big booming voice. And, when you've asked 3 times for them to pick up their socks, you can just naturally start saying, okay, I'm going to raise my voice a little bit so you hear me. And so those are things it's a journey. It's not, hey, tomorrow I'm going to take a course and then I'm going to be the best mom ever or the best dad ever. I'll have it all figured out. So
I think that's a point that's really good for us to remember as parents, as we just make a decision to be more safe. And you'd mentioned earlier about how babies, before they learn to talk, they'll just make noises and gestures and work it out. That as adults, we're very reticent to try anything that we're not at least already pretty good at. And so being willing to be back in that beginner's mind and to, bump into things, stub your toe as you're working it out and knock the rust off of these skills that we used to have. I think that having that willingness to feel less competent I think that's also important.
That's a really good point. Because that's, I think, a lot too, where I see resistance, especially from women. Hey, come take this self-defense class. Come take this situational awareness class. Let's have a conversation about self-defense tools. There's a little apprehension because maybe they did buy, let's say, mace spray. I can't tell you how many times when I've done a presentation and said, how many of you have mace spray? And let's say, most of the room raises their hand. And I'm like, how many of you have ever sprayed it? No one.
Yeah.
Because they're scared of it. And I'm like, I get it. And what good is it going to do you if you have fear around it because you've never played with it? We learn through play. And so that's why, like, when I sell mace, I always send a water trainer, which I don't think a lot of people are aware that that's available, to have something like that to practice with. So you can use it and see, oh, that's what the spray pattern looks like. That's how far it reaches. This is how much I need to have it in my hand, not at the bottom of my purse when trying to dig to find it in a situation. Too late. It's okay.
Or like you hear about every year, right? Where you hear this, or what you hear about every year about, this is how it feels like when the nozzle's pointed away from me, and this is what it feels like when it's pointed directly at my face. You hear about that a couple times a year. You'll hear a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin's dog's second owner, right? Did that.
Right. Yes. And so I think that was brilliant. Your point about it's harder as we get older to be the novice, to admit that we are still learning, because maybe in our business life, our career life, or in whatever aspect of our life that we've continually narrowed down our passions, right? Narrowed down our circle of friends, narrowed down our focus and what's important, our priorities. And so then to say, wait a minute, now I've got to open it back up, where I'm used to being seen as a smart, intelligent person, then to ask the stupid question. wait, I don't get that. Or, I'm this big, powerful person in the, the volunteer community or in the business community. And for me then to admit, like, I don't know how to do things, or what should I do? Would keys between my knuckles be a good option? Or what about this? And to all of a sudden admit that you're scared to walk back to your car at night in the parking ramp is kind of I don't want to admit that because, well, everybody else I'm sure has it figured out.
Yeah.
Or, well, I don't understand how that works, but I don't want to be the one to ask the question.
And then compound that as a parent, because, your kids are still young enough to think you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
Yeah.
And it's hard to let that go. Mine are 11 and 20. So the 20-year-old's figured out I'm human. But the 11-year-old, I still got him snowed. And it's hard to admit that it's hard to admit that we don't know in front of those kids and in front of ourselves, as you say, as we get older. After 30, the adult who willingly goes and tries something they're completely incompetent at becomes rarer and rarer with each passing year, and giving ourselves permission to do that and to model that for our kids.
Right. That brings up a good point is, okay, how do you talk to that older aged child who's all of a sudden thinks, well, mom and dad know nothing, or my parents know nothing, and I know everything. How do you have that conversation? And again, that's where I say, well, you can't just point blank ask or tell, because that stage in their life, they're all about exploring and experimenting and trying new things. They're trying to figure out where they fit into the world, where they fit into the social hierarchy. And so get curious, get to know them. And even if they don't have an answer, it might get them thinking, and they might not have an outwardly verbal conversation with you, but you simply asking, well, what would you do if you were walking back to your car and it's after dark and you felt like someone was following you? And they're like, well, I don't know. I don't know. And they walk away. You don't have to chase after them to get an answer or to say, well, this is what you should do. You've planted the seed. And now maybe, and again, I hate to be prescriptive because every child is different. Every parent-child relationship is different. But these are things that overall, okay, they don't have to have an answer, but guess what? You got them thinking. Even if they're not going to admit it to you, they're now thinking about what would I do? And then maybe there's a show on TV or an article or something, and you say, oh, well, that's a good idea. I never thought of that. Again, articulating, oh yeah, well, she realized I had a story of an 18-year-old female who was studying abroad, and she was walking down, and because that was her mode of transportation, she was walking from the bus stop to her residence and felt like she was being followed, and had the realization, well, after this block, there's no more shops, and then it's residential, and there's not as many people kind of out and about and public who could see me. So she made the choice to turn around and look at the person and say, are you following me? To which that male got startled and turned around and walked away. And I like to point out, kudos to her, because she did it while she was still she was aware enough to realize, I'm in a public place right now where others could assist me if I need to. Also places that are open, shops that I could go into if it didn't go as I'd hoped. And if she had asked, if that had just been someone walking the same direction behind her, and she turned around and said that natural reaction they had to turn and run away meant they probably had ill intent. Because somebody who had no ill intent would be like, what? No, I'm not following you. Sorry. Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. They're going to voice that response or have a different response depending on what their intention was. So I say it never hurts to ask or to say. But again, we share these stories because it might give someone listening an idea of, I never thought about that. When we say you got to be aware of your surroundings, sometimes I feel like that's like, okay, aware of what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And we make assumptions that people know what we're talking about. And until somebody raises their hand and says, what am I looking for? Then we don't have that. We're like, oh yeah. I had literally had a call from a woman who said, I need physical self-defense classes. I'm already very situationally aware. So I'm looking for the physical. And I'm like, great, perfect. Let's find that for you. Because it does me no good to sit and argue with her because I don't know her. No, I can assure you, you don't know, because maybe she does. It's having that, incorporating that conversation inside the overall self-defense conversation. I don't know if you've seen the video of the elderly couple that leaves their home and there's a bear cub on their patio.
No.
Yes, I show it. It's like the first video, probably one of my second or third slides, because it's a good icebreaker, because people come to a lot of my presentations with a lot of kind of anxiety of, oh, is this going to be blood and gore? Is this going to be scary? And so I like to show that video because it breaks the tension and it makes people laugh. And it's a really good way for me to say, you know, grandma and grandma walks out first and turns away from the bear. Grandpa comes out, locks the door, turns this way, like the bear's right in front of the cub, and then turns back and then turns again. Never once they both go out to their car. And the bear stops and kind of goes into statue mode, little cub. And then it's funny because you can almost read the body language of the bear, of him going, wait a minute, you guys didn't even see me? But what I like to point out is saying, if we have a preconceived notion that the predator or the threat is going to be another human, we're looking at eye level, right? Or it's going to be the monster hiding behind the corner in the dark. This is broad daylight. We're not going to know what to look for. But when I say, what do we all know about bear cubs? And every time everyone says, where there's a bear cub, there's a mama bear. And I say, in the back video, you can see garbage cans lined up. So maybe mama's out by their vehicle looking for lunch. And now grandma and grandpa just left the safety of their home and locked the door. And now they're going out and exposing themselves to a mama bear. Whereas before, okay, a bear cub, that's not necessarily an immediate threat, but it is a warning sign. And so reading your environment isn't always looking for the boogeyman in the bushes. It's looking for that anomaly that doesn't fit. This tells me something about my environment. And then making a decision there, taking action. Because again, if we get stuck in that loop of, what do? I don't know. That can cause you to freeze even longer versus, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to get to safety, taking action.
And then I think you raised another important point about when we think about safety, very often we're thinking about bad human actors trying to commit. Hold on a second. Someone tried to call me and my phone decided to act in open rebellion there for a moment. But when we think about safety, we so often think about bad human actors trying to do us wrong. But if you look at all of the death and accident statistics, it's going to be some other safety factor. Ice on your stoop, a baby bear on the trail, a doorway when you're traveling in another country with different codes that's hits you right about here.
Did that happen to you, Jason? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
No. I'm far too ninja-like to hurt myself doing something that lame. But that same awareness helps us with all of those aspects of safety. Kind of like you talk to any martial artist, what's the most important physical self-defense skill? They will all say break falls. Because how many times have you been in a fight lately, as opposed to how many times did you fall down this year?
Well, and I live in a northern state, so it's icy and cold. And how do you watch for ice on the sidewalk? How do you watch for ice on the road? So when you're driving, you're more aware to leave more space. You know, and that's another thing we talk about, the OODA loop, you know, observe, orient, decide, act. And like some of the diagrams you can find out there describing that or visually depicting that loop are quite confusing. And what I do is I say, it's driving your car. Almost everyone here in the States drives a car. And so I break it down, showing that you use these skills every day. You just never looked at them from that personal safety perspective. And the orient, I've come to agree with a friend of mine who says that's one of the most important things to recognize or be self-aware of, is because your past life experiences and how you were raised, where you were raised, culture you were raised in, is going to impact the decision tree that you have in your head. I use again the example of driving a car. If you've ever rear-ended someone, that decision that I don't want that to happen to me again is going to impact how you drive, and how we can relate that to our personal safety. I think talking about that brings up the subject of biases, where they come from, our judgment. So many people are afraid to trust their intuition because they're like, well, I don't want to seem judgmental. I don't want to judge someone by the clothes they're wearing or by the skin color or whether they're male or female. It's like, okay, I definitely 100 agree and want to eradicate that, but I really don't think you could ever eradicate it. But if we're aware of it, we can help work through it. And so if you grew up, I always use country, if you grew up in the country, more of a country setting, there's a lot more space, you're not used to a real high concentration of people, and then you go visit somewhere like New York City and you're walking around, you're going to have a lot different orientation. There's so many people and I can't see because there's so many buildings, and this is really disorienting, and I'm having anxiety or fear because it's different than what I'm used to. And
or vice versa. Go out in the woods as a city person. Every sound is a grizzly bear.
Yes. What was that? It's a squirrel.
Yeah.
It was just a squirrel. Or it's a bird. I had a girlfriend come and to visit me, and it was hilarious because she was from Southern California, grew up Newport Beach area, so she'd never really seen a cornfield. And she came to visit, and she made the comment to me. She said, I didn't know there was actual places where the cornfields came to the road, and that freaked me out. Like, she was like, children of the corn. Oh my gosh. And I was like, I didn't think twice about that. So again, that orientation impacts where our fears come from, where our anxieties come from. And if you can recognize that and be aware, that can help you conquer your fears.
I think one of the most dangerous biases that we have when it comes from a safety standpoint, especially, is that bias towards assuming nothing is wrong, that it's not going to happen to me. So you spot a couple things that are a little sketchy, but you think, nah,
I'm probably overreacting.
Yeah. Right. I would be willing to bet that you have a pretty strong response to that and address that in some of your classes. Could you tell us a little bit about how do we overcome that very dangerous bias?
In succinct, not going on forever and ever. The biggest thing I talk to women is again, going back to trusting your intuition and playing out the scenario, because that's really the opportunity for me to play devil's advocate and to play out the worst case scenario. And again, not fear mongering, but getting them thinking, oh yeah, because again, they don't come from a criminal mindset. They don't come from a predator mindset. So to them, it goes back to that. How could a human do that to another human? It's because you don't have that mindset, because you're a good human. So to you would never fathom doing that to another human being. But unfortunately, there are people out there who don't think like you, who have a very different criminal mindset, predatory mindset, and they are going to capitalize and manipulate you on that basis, knowing that you're a good human, that you would not expect them to do the wrong thing or to take advantage of you. And so kind of correlating that by the example story I would have is, I was on a college campus doing mentoring for young female entrepreneurs. And of course, they always get, well, what do you do? and I start talking about it, they get curious about it. And I say, well, here, let me give you an example. And I asked this one lady, young woman, saying, would you get into an Uber that you ordered individually if there was two males in the front seat, so the driver and there was a male passenger in the front seat? And she looked at me, she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so you ordered that Uber, not as an Uber pool, but as an individual rider. Would you ask who that passenger was? Oh, is this somebody you're dropping off? And if they said, or I just said, would you ask? And she said, well, no, it's not my business. And I said, okay, so here's the thing I'm going to play out for you. You did not expect, you verified that it was the right car. You verified that it was the right driver, but you didn't expect to see a male in the front passenger seat. It is absolutely okay for you to ask, hi, who are you? Well, why are you in the car? Because let's say you get in the car without asking, without questioning. Now all of a sudden you're in a vehicle with two males and they have complete control of where you're going and where you're going to end up. And her eyes got really big. And I said, that's the type of thing. You did not expect that. It is completely okay for you to say, I'll get another Uber, even if they get mad and drive off. Because are you going to chance it because you don't want to seem rude to two strangers you'll probably never see again? No, it's not worth it. And so overcoming and helping them realize, kind of like the woman who was being followed in her abroad, their reaction tells you more about their intent. Because anyone with no ill intent will feel bad for making you feel uncomfortable. Somebody who had ill intent is now going to try and make that your problem, when you should always be able to state your boundaries. And if you have to state your boundaries and they fight you on it, then it's a good thing that you stated boundaries and now you need to enforce them and realize that says more about what they were intending to do than being upset that you had a boundary.
That particular sequence, I think, bears a lot of repeating to teenagers as they're dealing with the social anxiety with enforcing their boundaries, that if they have a problem with you respecting yourself, that tells you about them. That doesn't tell you about you.
Right.
Yeah.
And
now you keep using this. No, carry on.
Oh, I was just going to say, and
yeah.
That's why too, having these conversations and being curious, well, what would you do? Would you say something? Would you not? And helping them think through it, helping walk through it. Or what, that's why I say too, anytime you read an article about someone being attacked or a home invasion, that's a great opportunity not to question the victim or blame the victim or say they should have done this, should have done that. It's, well, what would you do in that situation? Because a lot of times, again, we don't have that criminal mindset, or we don't think it'll happen to us. And therefore we don't think about it, unless you're like you and I in this business, who I'm constantly being like, well, what would I do if I was in this store and something happened right now? Or what would I do if I was at home and something happened right now?
I think that's very much the real advantage of martial arts training, right? Where you know some martial artists, a very few martial artists who have successfully used their martial arts in a physical self-defense situation. And it was never a textbook perfect roundhouse kick followed by a spear hand. It was this messy scrum, right?
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, that could suggest that learning the roundhouse kick didn't really help you. But what it was is because every time you go in class and you learn a new technique or you practice your kick, you're thinking about what you would do if you were ever called upon to use it. So you're doing that drill, that thinking about, okay, in this situation, I might do this. In this situation, I might do that. And even if you don't do this or that, the thought about it helps you respond better in the middle of the emergency.
And the key thing you said there is your thought, that mental map, that mental strategy. Having that in your head ahead of time will then help your action happen faster. Because while all of that is going on and you might be in cognitive overload of fear and scared, and this is right in front of me now, and I'm digging the bottom of my purse for my mace, like if you're already doing it because you have a mental strategy, So saying goes, your body can't go where your mind hasn't. And having that plan, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Murphy's Law is you can have every plan in the books, and then the thing that happens is going to be the one thing that you didn't plan for. But if you have enough of like a variety of plans, you can piecemeal something. You can a la carte, we'll say. You can a la carte a plan. And I tell women, you mentally strategize your day every single day. And even males, how many of us get up in the morning and at some point we say, these are the things I need to accomplish today, and this is the way this is the order in which I'm going to do it. This is the direction I'm going to start driving to get all of my stops. Or these are the order of tasks I'm going to do that makes the most sense so I get them all done. We mentally strategize ahead of time a game plan all the time. So now this is mentally strategizing, coming up with a game plan of what you would do. And I did play, I love telling stories, but a funny little story. So I asked my two boys, I said, well, what would you do if someone was trying to break into our house? And bless their little hearts, they were both like, oh, I would grab like my toy diamonds Minecraft sword and hit them over the head. And I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate your warrior mentality. And if someone is trying to get out into the house, you need to get to safety. You don't need to confront them because there's nothing in this house that is more important than you. And so going out the back door and running to our neighbor's house and having our neighbors call 911 is the most important thing I want you to do. And they had to think about that. I was like, no, this isn't Minecraft where you attack the zombie with the sword and it dies. This is real life. But I don't want to scare them. I just want to remind them, I appreciate that you would want to protect the home, but this is what's most important.
Yeah, we have the same thing. Our house is a sprawling one-story ranch thing with 3 glass sliders. I refer to it as a tactically porous residence. But our home invasion plan is our fire plan. Everybody out, go next door.
And that's a good point. I love that you say your tactical home invasion plan is your fire plan. Because again, let's keep it simple. Let's not have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I for our kids. Like, okay, well, what makes the most sense? And that again comes that a la carte piece. Okay, in general, we want to get to safety. In general, we want to maintain human life. So foundationally, what do we need to know how to do? What do we need to teach our kids? What do we need to have a communication for our kids so that they know? Because we're not always going to be there, especially as they get older, especially as they get more independent. We need them to have their own personal safety skills. We need them to have the foundation on which to make smart decisions. And if you've protected them too much, kept them in a bubble too much, made the decisions for them too much, you're actually setting them up for failure. That personal responsibility and accountability is so important, not only when they get their first job, but when they get their first apartment, or in their first relationship. They need to have those personal safety skills. They need to have that accountability and responsibility. And again, take care of yourself first. Know yourself first so you can be that good human to another human.
Wow. You've done what my wife would say is impossible. You've rendered me speechless.
I'll take that as a compliment then.
There's a word that you have used earlier a couple of times that I would love to circle back to, and that's curiosity.
Yeah.
That embracing it. You and I met through Rory Miller, who,
yes.
He's got a one-man campaign to end our reliance on the Cooper color codes, because it paints this image of being a sentry, head on a swivel, rah rah rah, real tactical. But that curiosity is all that really is. What's that other quote that is sometimes attributed to Einstein about how the most exciting sound in science isn't aha, It's, that's funny.
I didn't know that one, but I like it. I might
Right?
have to use that.
Yeah, and I feel like it applies exactly there, where what you're saying is as you're going through life, listening to that, that's funny, and then exploring it and giving yourself permission to admit that you don't know something, or to derail your timeline, or
Yeah.
to have a 20-minute conversation with your kid, even though baseball practice is in 15 minutes. And leading by example, of course, in all of those things. And that's one last question I have for you. Then I'll let you go back into your day, which I assume is as busy as mine. Isn't it weird how we're busier now that we're stuck at home than when we were going to work?
Yeah.
I don't know what's up
It's
with that.
definitely the last year has been a journey of self-discovery of like, busy
Yeah.
work versus productive work.
Yeah. But what it seems like you're saying is that we're born with all the instincts we need to keep ourselves safe, and we apply the skills we need to keep ourselves safe in non-safety environments, whether it's planning our day, whether it's performing quality control at our job, whether it's negotiating where to go to dinner with a new boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it is. Um, we have the instincts and we have the skills, and yet so many people vigorously resist the call to combine those to make ourselves safer on a daily basis. And I'm curious, what kind of pushback have you gotten, like some of the specific objections, and how have you overcome them when you're talking about your program and bringing people to, pick up that mantle of keeping themselves safe?
Well, I think what I've found, and I'll speak from a lot of the women perspective that I've had pushback from, is that assumption. Again, assumptions are bad for us. The assumption that I've never taken a martial arts class in my life. I was never an athlete in high school. I I have so much on my plate. I'm constantly My mind is constantly elsewhere, that I don't know how I could find space, find time to learn a new skill, to all of a sudden become athletic when I'm a middle-aged woman who has never participated in a sport in my life, or it's been since high school. Is overcoming that and saying, well, you already do everything you need to do every day. You already use all of the foundational skills for personal safety all the time. I need 1 hour of your time to help shift your perspective. Life's all about our perspectives. Our perspectives are our reality. So if your perspective is, I'm never going to learn something, our thoughts become our reality. Well, then no, you won't. But I can guarantee you, if you spend an hour with me, I will help you see your skills in a different light and give you that confidence to say, well, wait a minute, I can figure this out. Or the self-confidence in your own ability to say, oh, I already do know what I'm doing. I never thought of it that way. And that's what I get a lot of times is, this is common sense. I just never thought of it that way. And going back to that natural curiosity, I have a mantra for myself is be bold, be kind, be curious, which when it comes to work, when it comes to personal life and relationships, those are all flowery and have the best pretty memes and all of that stuff. But when it comes to personal safety, there's a little bit of a, wait a minute, you mean I could be a kind person and still have boundaries? Wait, you mean I can be bold and make decisions to live life how I want to live it and still be safe? I can be curious about life and be safe. That's all those type of things where I'm like, yeah, those are being curious. That's how we all learn as babies. Babies are curious. They want to touch everything. They want to put everything in their mouth when they're little because they're figuring out their world. And to like your point with Rory, I think a lot of what I've heard him say is we lose that as we get older, kind of to our point of we get less and less wanting or less, motivated to be the newbie.
Yeah.
I'll share the first time that I got to train with Rory was through Violence Dynamics here in Minnesota. And at the first introductory morning day where we had to go through and say who we were and why we were there, I stood up and said, hi, I have never taken I've taken one session self-defense class, women's self-defense class. I've never done martial arts, but I wrestled the heck out of my brother growing up. So that is my only experience with grappling. And I remember seeing Rory chuckle because, again, to your point earlier, it's not a perfect choreographed moves when it comes to self-defense. It's a melee, it's craziness, it's, just complete disorganization. But if you have the mindset of not me, not today, and I will fight back because my life is worth it, that's where you need to be. And, if I could touch on just before we end, this is so important because we forget sometimes in self-defense because it's much easier to talk about that unknown predator, that sort of asocial predator. And what's harder to talk about is women are attacked by people they know. 80 to 90% of the time, depending on what stats you look at, we are attacked violently or sexually by someone we know. And that has a different glitch response. That causes us to say, how could I fight back against someone who I love and who says loves me? How could I gouge out their eyeballs? How could I crush their throat? How could I cause them serious harm? How could I blow out their knee? And that's where we need to have that conversation with women, because unfortunately, especially when it comes to domestic violence, I've heard too often women who were literally being threatened by the person, whether they're being choked or hit, is, I'm going to kill you. And they get this, fine, just end it, because they've been under this abusive situation so long. And so we have to talk to that mindset of, you are worth it. Yeah. You deserve to live. No one deserves to treat you this way. And so somebody doing that to you, yes, cause them harm.
And that's
kind of to Tim Larkin's thing, when violence is the answer.
Yeah, well, that's right there. Yeah, and that kind of circles back to some of the points you made in the beginning, where there is no easy solution to domestic violence. I wish there was. I wish life was more complicated and pleasant. But one of the most reliable solutions, I think, is if you raise your daughter or son, men are also abused domestically, but it's overwhelmingly violence against women, to have and respect their boundaries, to state them clearly, and to enforce them after they've stated them. That abusive person isn't going to target them nearly as likely, because they want to go find a nice and easy target.
Exactly. And those starting, abusive relationships don't start out with black eyes. They start out with jealousy. They start out with, I want you all to myself, possessiveness, and that not respecting their emotional or mental boundaries. So those are some of those early warning signs that if we can teach our young girls and young boys that it is okay to say, I'm taking care of myself. I'm going to spend this time by myself. And if somebody's not respecting that, it's okay to be like, I don't know if I want to hang out with that person, because if this is what I want to do, that should be respected and not be made. I shouldn't be made felt. I can't even talk right now. I shouldn't be made to feel bad. There we go. That I don't want to go hang out tonight, that I want to get sleep because I have finals next week, or I've got a big test tomorrow. Those are the people you want in your life,
Yeah. So. No, fantastic. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And her website, the Diamond Arrow Group, I'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes. You have some resources, some courses. Once things come back together, I'm sure there'll be places for people to go train with you live when we're all meeting back in person again. But definitely check it out, everybody. Kelly is even smarter than she has appeared today. So,
well, and honestly, like in this weird time of not knowing what trainings look like, I always just say follow on Instagram, the Diamond Arrow Group, or follow on Facebook, the same handle, the Diamond Arrow Group, because I share stuff and I share what I'm learning, kind of bring you along my journey of learning, because I was a newbie too a few years ago, and I'm still learning, I'm a consummate student. So that's a great place to connect. And if there's ever something, I've had a lot of times where a parent has hired me for their daughter's dance team or the girls hockey team or the soccer team, Girl Scouts, troops, whatever, I can tailor the program so it's not scary, it's empowering. It's bringing their confidence up, which is what the Diamond Arrow Group's all about. So,
outstanding. Well, thank you again, Kelly, and have a great day. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe. Today's episode was brought to you by our heroes over at Patreon: Todd Elner, Beth Edwards, Douglas Sedovey, Hugh O'Donnell, Art Brick, American Institutes of Kenpo, Beth Pratt, Richard Hubbard, Wayfinder Advantage, Kit Bradley, Lee Douglas, Amy Rivers, Neil Fastine, Kate Carlson, Brom Payton, Jenny Coakley, and Chris Jordan. Join the illustrious heroes by backing us at patreon.com/safestfamily. If you can't, that's okay, but do consider liking us and subscribing here on YouTube or sharing your favorite episodes on social media. Even a little bit on your end can make a lot of difference here. Thank you for watching today. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.